Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Bwaaa!
Bwaaa trash fight all through the night, deep in the heart of Texas. The trailer park is nice and dark, deep in the heart of Texas. That drinks his brew and he spits his chew, deep in the heart of Texas. The TV blares but no one cares, deep in the heart of Texas. Here we go!
Hey there, welcome to Bwaaa, King of the Hill podcast. I am Mike.
And I'm Rusty.
Rusty, we have a special episode.
We
haven't had a guest in a while.
No, it's been a little while since
Yeah.
we've had a guest.
Yeah. So tell us who you brought into the show today,
Or
or who was kind enough to come
kind
into
enough
our
to come. Well,
stratosphere.
Well, on Twitter, as you know, already know, I follow a lot of animators.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of cartoonists. A lot of people that are in the industry of what we're talking about, being
Sure.
King of the Hill and stuff. And through it, I stumbled on our guest here today, which is John Fountain. He goes by F. And I was fortunate enough to be able to secure an interview with him. He is a. You want to tell us who you are, what your official titles are?
Oh gosh. Well, my official titles they start with "wanted by the state." I mean the stuff I'm best known for is stuff where I've been either a storyboard artist or a director.
Okay.
So I've been a director and or storyboard artist and or series creator at Nickelodeon, Disney, Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers, and probably a few places that I'm forgetting right at the moment.
So
But,
pretty much
Sure.
everywhere that matters when you talk about animation in the last 30 years.
Yeah. Now, see, that was about 15 years of my career. I am currently no longer in Los Angeles. About 10 years ago, my wife and I decided that we had had about enough of Los Angeles, and we moved out of there, and we lived for a couple of years in New York, and then COVID hit, and we said, let's get the hell out of here. And we now currently reside in the great state of North Carolina.
The top
wow.
top of a mountain where nobody can get you with.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. And frankly, where nobody's targeting anyway. So no. And but that being said, even for about 5 years before I left Los Angeles, I had started doing so much work just from home that when it came time to get out of Los Angeles, not a lot changed. I'm currently the supervising director on a Cartoon Network show that is coming out this spring/summer.
Awesome.
We're literally putting the finishing touches on it right as we
Oh,
speak.
wow. No.
Is this one of sorry to interrupt you, but is this one of the new shows that's in the new wave of Cartoon Network? Like, because I know that from stuff that I've read and things like that Cartoon Network is kind of in a reinvention phase and kind of trying to go back to the core cartoons like they were when they first started, instead of just making animation directed just at kids. They're trying to bring back the core animation thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what's funny about that is this particular show, even though it's going to be obviously aired on Cartoon Network United States, it was created through, or rather picked up by Cartoon Network Europe, which actually handles or deals with Cartoon Network Africa.
Okay.
And what sets this particular show apart is, apart from myself, it's an entirely African production.
Oh wow!
Oh wow, that's awesome.
I was brought in as the guy who knows how to make cartoons for a global audience. But apart from me, I've been directing remotely from here in the United States over to various countries in Africa, and it's a super young crew, and it's a whole bunch of new people, and they're super enthusiastic, and the creator is Nigerian, and he's also really young, and it's super exciting. So, but now the thing is, people are going to watch this show. It's called Garbage Boy and Trash Can.
Okay.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Google that. Yeah, it's a kids superhero show, and if you Google it, there've been a few articles run in like Animation Magazine and Kids Screen and stuff like that. But even before the sort of all the various shakeups at Cartoon Network, this show existed as an entity all its own. Like it began as sort of an incubator program for Cartoon Network to reach out to young creators, and they held various contests, and the creator of this show won that contest, and so
that is awesome.
This show did kind of exist in its own bubble. Having said that, if you're a fan of the old school Cartoon Network shows like Powerpuff Girls,
Love it,
and Dexter's Lab, and stuff like that.
Oh, anything by Travasky, I love.
This show is going to be right up your alley, and it's not, again, because no one was really paying that close attention to us. We just we didn't go, well, we're targeting this for this age and we're really focusing on that. We're just like, let's make it funny.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
wonderful.
Yeah, I love
that's
that.
wonderful. It does feel like sometimes that animation over the years has lost that let's make it funny part.
The golden era, like the golden era of cartoons, where I grew up in the 90s, so I got all of the, like he's talking about, the Powerpuff Girls, the Dexter's Lab, all that stuff, and it was just...
Oh, those are great shows,
I have to give those to my kids now, my 12-year-old, and I have to give them to him to watch, because... a lot of the stuff that he's watching now, I'm just like, it just doesn't have a lot. It's just not as funny, I feel like, it's just not as honestly funny.
Yeah, it's, that's always been a thing. And that's something, as someone who has created shows myself, I've sold 6 shows, but none of them, only one pilot ever aired. And that just goes to show like how tricky the whole process is. But I would frustrate my agents, because they would tell me, they're like, you got to go in when you pitch these shows, you got to go in and tell them what age demographic you're shooting for.
Yeah.
And eventually I'd be in the meeting and they'd be like, well, who is this cartoon for? And I was like, people who want to be entertained.
That's fantastic.
Love it. Yeah, I love it.
They always found that to be such a radical answer. It's like, yes, it is kid friendly, but I will entertain you. I promise.
Yeah. Well,
it's not that hard.
Honestly, that feeds into something I was going to ask you about. One of the shows that you worked on was Fairly OddParents, right?
Yeah, that's probably what I'm most well known for, because I was the supervising director, kind of unofficially, for the first 3 seasons of that show.
So I'll tell you, if I will be 54 years old this year, and so that means I had kids that were very much in that Fairly OddParents sweet spot. When the heyday was. And I got to tell you, that's one of the shows that I did not mind watching. And I know that sounds like a really backhanded compliment, and I don't mean it that way. I mean, as a parent of small kids, there's a lot of crap out there that you have to watch.
Oh, goodness.
And Fairly OddParents it actually had a sense of humor. So
no, I know exactly what you mean, because I'm going to be 53 this year. But I got started with the whole family thing way late. So my daughter's only 7.
Oh, wow.
So I literally just finally got out of the whole like Peppa Pig. And
what is wrong with that pig's face, by the way? There's something wrong with that pig's face.
Honestly though, I will be totally honest. For a preschooler show, it's actually pretty good.
It is.
It's not bad.
It's not that bad.
Max and Ruby's pretty good too.
I don't like to act. Now, I could name you off the shows that I just found to be just absolutely grating, and that I totally couldn't stand. But I've made a point ever since I started getting on social media.
Sure.
I'm like, I'm not going to get on. I'm only going to talk about the stuff I like. I'm not going to talk about the stuff I don't like.
I don't blame you. I think people can probably look at your resume and go, "Oh, that was it." You know, those were the 3 that he didn't like that much. Yeah.
There is one major franchise on my resume. I won't say which one.
Sure.
That I absolutely hated working on.
Really?
And it is beloved by everybody else, and it's not Fairly OddParents.
Okay.
But
well, you've got some fairly, no pun intended, but you've got some fairly big shows on here. I mean, you know, when you start looking at some of your resume, I mean, you're hitting some Scooby-Doo, you're hitting some SpongeBob.
I was so eager to stop you before you went there. IMDb has my page completely fouled up.
Oh, do
Okay,
they?
so it's not right.
Oh,
on there. Okay, I got
fantastic.
you.
I never worked on Scooby-Doo.
Oh.
I never worked on SpongeBob.
Okay.
Did you work on South Park?
I worked on the South Park movie.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
yes,
See,
saw
for
that,
me,
yeah.
I was 9 when that movie came out. So when we were sneaking and watching South Park when I was a kid, we were young watching South Park. So I would sneak and watch it when my parents went to sleep on Comedy Central. So yeah, that movie was a huge part of my teen years.
So that eliminates a couple of them, right?
Yeah.
As far as the ones that you don't like.
The big hitters that I'm most known for.
Yeah.
Number 1 is the Fairly OddParents.
Yeah.
Probably immediately second in line after that is Invader Zim.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because on Invader Zim, I was the lead character designer for the first season of the show.
Oh, that's awesome. Like Gurr and Piggy and all that.
Yeah, except the thing is, that's why this is unimpressive. See, I'm going to be the worst guest you guys have ever had.
No, not at all. We've had worse.
Here's why my time on Invader Zim was not that impressive. All of the really, truly awesome characters, the main characters, those were all designed by the show's creator, Jonan Vasquez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I got the job because, oddly enough, my natural drawing style at the time was very similar to his.
Okay.
And they needed a character designer, and nobody had sort of come close. Now, shortly after I got hired, and after about season 1, they found this kid, Aaron Alexovich, who was clearly like 10 times better than me. So after season 1, I was like, you know what, you guys don't need me anymore. Fairly OddParents needs a director. I'm gonna go over to Fairly OddParents.
Yeah.
But so that's the second most famous show I'm probably known for. The third show I like to bring up in my sort of triumvirate of favorite shows to work on is one that hardly anybody watched, but has an enormous online fan base of just the nicest people on earth. And that's My Life as a Teenage Robot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a really well done show. I think I liked that one. I saw that on here, and I was hoping that was one that you actually worked on.
No, I was a director, a writer, and a storyboard artist on that show, and I count that is on the Mount Rushmore of most underrated shows ever.
Oh, I agree.
Like you could watch that now, and it's poignant, it's funny, it's got cool action in it. It was created by Rob Renzetti, who's one of the nicest guys on earth. And Rob Renzetti is he's not the creator of, but he is one of the main brains behind Gravity Falls.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
He also,
awesome.
when they brought back My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, he's the guy that was sort of the artistic creative juice behind that. So, so My Life as a Teenage Robot was a great show, and one that I like to bring up in the sort of top 3 shows that I talk about. Then I also worked on something, again, a lot lesser known, but for Nickelodeon fans from the early aughts, Chalk Zone is one that people bring up a lot.
Zone.
Yeah,
I know Chalk Zone.
Sure.
I'm a big in animation.
That's also got a really neat, really cool, fun fan base that pop up every now and then. Dora the Explorer, and then the one that I brag about now, at least when I'm around kids that are of college age, is I storyboarded the pilot for Rick and Morty.
Oh,
that's awesome. Yeah, actually, I'm not able to get an interview with him right now because of the reboot for King of the Hill, but I correspond with Wes Archer.
Nice.
Quite regularly, and he's not able to do anything right now because of the reboot for King of the Hill. He's under lock and key at the moment, but
sure.
Yeah, he's another one of the storyboard director kind of guys that I've gotten to talk to because in King of the Hill there's a lot of just really, really good direction that he does, and there's it's really like it's almost cinematic. Like it's not meant to be in a 20-minute show of rednecks, if you will. It just doesn't seem like it's meant. Like some of his direction is meant to even be in a show that's just 20 minutes long. I love it.
So
that's absolutely true.
I'm gonna go back to talking like I'm old here. One of the things that I saw on your resume, and you tell me whether this is an actual thing or not, but Bob and Doug in 2009.
Yes.
Okay.
I was hoping. I was so thrilled to hear that you're 54 years old.
That's right.
You might remember Bob and Doug McKenzie. The glory that is Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Yeah. So did you get to? Do you meet any of these folks, like the voiceover artists and things?
Oh, I mean, I have met quite a few. Yeah.
Okay.
And now I have a great story about Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Okay.
So for younger folks aren't going to get this, but Bob and Doug McKenzie.
That's all right. It's just for me and you right now. We're good.
They were like Wayne's World before Wayne's World. They were like they were characters from a show called SCTV.
Yep.
And they were two Canadian bumpkins putting on what is essentially a cable access show. Yeah. And there's no way to describe it other than they were just kind of bumpkin rubes, and they were funny.
They're just idiots who
go
always
back and watch that. Yeah, I've never seen that. I never heard of that one. That's one I never heard of.
They're just two idiots that would always come up roses first. I mean, they could fall in shit and come out in roses. I mean, it just shoving mice into beer bottles and taking it back to the factory
trying
and
to
the
get
whole
free beer. Right.
Yeah, but fighting Max von Sydow in a stupid comedy.
By the way,
I mean, it's just.
Now you're referencing the movie Strange Brew.
Yes,
You've seen the movie Strange Brew, yes?
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the correlation between Strange Brew and Hamlet?
I have not. No.
Watch Strange Brew and think of Hamlet.
Okay. All right. You got it.
It is the story of Hamlet. Bob and Doug McKenzie are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Oh, yeah.
And the entire movie is Hamlet.
Wow. Okay. That does make sense now that you say that. Yeah. And I want to, number one, go ahead.
The brewery is Elsinore Brewery instead of Elsinore Castle as in Hamlet.
Well, that makes total sense then.
The daughter is actually that she's Hamlet.
Yeah.
Because you'll note she goes insane.
Right.
The hockey player is Ophelia. And at one point he quote unquote drowns, even though he doesn't die.
Sure.
But so it's Hamlet. The whole thing is Hamlet.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So these characters at the time of in the I don't know what was it, mid '80s.
Yeah.
They were huge. They had a huge comedy album. Yeah. They were the talk of the town for a while.
Well, and not to interrupt you, but the amazing thing about Bob and Doug McKenzie is they were as big as Wayne's World, but they were one of the only things I can think of from that time that had those type of characters that didn't come from SNL.
Absolutely, no.
Yes, and
yeah.
It was Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis.
Right.
Okay, so
yeah.
During one of my many periods when I was living in LA, when you're a working animator, particularly as a storyboard artist and a director, you go for months on end where you might be out of a job. A show will end its season and they don't know if it's getting picked up for another season. Right. And they'll say to you, well, we want you back, but it may be 6 months before we know whether or not we get a pickup. Yeah. So during one of those periods, I get a call about a studio that's doing a Bob and Doug cartoon. And I'm like, oh, I love Bob and Doug. I would love for the opportunity to do that. And so I go to the studio. It's a very small studio, but it is owned and run by Dave Thomas, who is Doug McKenzie. Yeah. So I go there, and to my amazement, Dave's studio is right there, and he's got pictures with, him and Dan Aykroyd and all these, famous SNL alum on the wall.
Sure.
And so anyway, the production is having problems. Mm-hmm. They're way behind. They're not getting anywhere. There aren't that many experienced storyboard artists on it, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And for one of my occasions when I went into the studio, I happened to be talking to Dave Thomas, and he was griping about the problems, and I said, Dave, I can fix this for you.
Yeah.
He's like, and Dave's a grumpy guy, and I love him. He was great to work with. It's like, really, how are you gonna fix it? And I go, well, I was a supervising director on the Fairly OddParents, and I've learned a few things.
Yeah.
He's like, a lot of the disconnect comes between the writing process and the storyboarding process.
Sure.
So how about for every episode, I do quick sketch storyboard thumbnails, they're called, with you sitting there right with me while I draw it out in real time, and you can tell me whether or not you like what you see, and we'll do that page by page for the script.
Wow.
He thought for a second, he's like, I love it. And so for the next 6 months,
You even sound like it when you do that. That's great.
a couple times a week, I would go sit next to Dave Thomas
Yeah.
and sketch out the show, and it worked like a charm. It's a tragic shame that it never really, I don't know, they wound up just deciding they didn't want to do it, and it didn't air. But I feel like it would have competed with a lot of the other adult animated shows at the time. So anyway, Bob and Doug was a great experience.
Yeah, that was you crushed that question, because I was going to ask you about Dave Thomas and how he was and stuff, and that's fantastic.
He's great.
Yeah, the only thing I saw that was wrong with that cartoon is no Rick Moranis. Instead you had Dave Coulier, right?
Yeah. He, Rick Moranis, and I'm not going to go into whole controversy.
No.
I didn't. One thing I learned about Dave really early on is if he starts to tell you a story, you just listen.
Sure.
But you don't pester him with questions that he might not want to answer. So I didn't go into the whole what was going on with Rick Moranis thing.
Yeah. Rick just quit. He quit everything.
He quit Hollywood.
Yeah.
And by the way, I lived in LA for 15 years. I worked in animation, which is literally it's the redheaded stepchild of the entertainment industry. And even I got sick of that atmosphere. So I can't blame Rick Moranis. I can't blame anyone for eventually going, you know what, Hollywood, it's been great. But
yeah.
toodaloo.
Yeah. Well, especially a guy like him who obviously was a big family man and, all of that. And just wanted his family to live a regular life, and that's
honorable. It's very respectable of him, because there's not a lot of people
Yeah.
that go through what he went through that don't continue to, work. Work is usually how a lot of people cope with problems like that. But he said, well, no, I'm going to put all of my time and effort into my family, which I like that.
So, F, let me ask you a couple more questions, and we'll get you out of here.
Yeah.
South Park, Matt and Trey, any reflections on that?
Whenever anyone asks me about that, I'm forced to tell the absolute truth.
Sure.
I was really just a cog in the wheel on that movie.
Gotcha.
Did not get to hang out with them. Didn't even really ever get to meet them. I only got to observe them from afar.
Sure.
Because everything you've heard about the rumors about the just breakneck speed at which the television episodes are made is 100% true.
Yeah, definitely.
The movie was not too different. So we were moving at a breakneck speed. And, this was the show hadn't been on for that long when the movie came out.
Right.
No, it only been on for a few years, right?
This was their big bid to show everyone, hey, look, we're a force to be reckoned with. So here's what I was able to observe. When I would see Trey and Matt come in, and by the way, the animation director who Butters is fashioned after was the guy I mostly worked with, and he was a gem. So
and that's Butters. Butters is, like you said, that's the guy that they created Butters from. Is that guy?
Yeah, Eric Stroh was his name, and he was their animation director. But from what I was able to observe of Trey and Matt, whenever they would come in, Matt seemed super chill. I'd hear him on the phone making, reservations for them to go to Vegas and hang out, or for dinner reservations, stuff like that. Seemed super duper chill. Trey just always looked like he had been up all night working. And this was before everyone was shaving their heads, but he would shave his head, and he was it just looked intense. Yeah. He was really serious. And, I've heard it from other people who know them better that's kind of the dynamic is, Trey is really, really serious about it. And, they're each other's yin and yang. You couldn't have one without the other. So,
yeah. Well, and obviously that system works for them. They've been pumping out.
Absolutely.
You talk about some guys that pump out content.
Of all the adult animated shows, South Park is one of the most just consistently funny. I never watch it and think to myself, this is no longer funny.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is very consistent. Now, you said that you sold 6 shows and only one of them made it to pilot. You want to give us just a real brief breakdown on those shows that you sold?
Oh, no.
That's a great answer.
That's
okay.
Great. Love it.
Well, no, the fact of the matter is, I still have some aspirations that something will be done with them someday. And so I don't want to go, I don't want to go into, but the one that I made that aired was part of an incubator program that Nickelodeon had at the time called Oh Yeah Cartoons.
I remember cartoons.
I had one. It was another one of those situations where you could go pitch your idea, and if they liked it, they'd make a 7-minute short for the Oh Yeah Cartoon show, which was really just an anthology show.
Sure.
And then if that short got a good reaction, they'd option it for a series.
Wonderful way to incubate that kind of stuff, get that stuff flowing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So mine was called The Tantrum, and it was about a kid superhero who got his superpowers from throwing temper tantrums.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
It was one of the first things I'd ever pitched, and they picked it up. And so I got, this was only the second studio I'd ever worked at.
Yeah.
So they picked it up, and this was all while I was working sort of simultaneously on Chalk Zone, Invader Zim, and the Fairly OddParents.
Sure.
That I was making this short. And it was actually Butch Hartman, the creator of Fairly OddParents.
Yeah.
I asked him to direct my pilot, and he was like, "No, you're going to direct it." I'm like, "I don't want to direct. Directing looks hard." He's like, "That's exactly why you're going to do it." And so, by golly, he sat me down and he taught me how to direct, and that wound up being the majority of my career. But what's funny is, so I made the cartoon, and before it aired, just even on the merits of how good it turned out, Nickelodeon bought the rights lock, stock, and barrel. Like, they optioned it for a series. I spent a year developing it as a series, and it came really close to getting picked up as a series.
Wow.
Because it was at a time where, the Oh Yeah Cartoon show that it got picked up for, that's where Seth MacFarlane got his start. That's where Butch Hartman got his start. Craig McCracken didn't get his start on that show, but he got started with the same group of people that were doing Oh Yeah Cartoon. So, like, a lot of great stuff was coming out of there, and I was riding that mojo. Wow. So
there was that was what I was going to ask too, was the Oh Yeah Cartoons. That was something that I personally liked a lot of. I'm really big on like the anthology. I grew up in the 90s. Well, I grew up in the 90s. I'm a 90, like 1990 was when I was born. So I grew up through all this era of cartoons. So I love all of it. Like I'm really excited to see the revival, for Cartoon Network. I'm really excited for this new generation of cartoons.
Garbage Boy and Trash Can is, I believe, it's going to push all those buttons, because we look, I was working with a really, really inexperienced group of people anyway. So my whole philosophy from the very beginning as a supervising director was saying, look, I'm not going to overthink this one. I'm just going to let this one live and breathe as its own entity. And it's not slick, but it's charmingly unslick, Yeah. But what it is, it may not be slick, but it's super funny.
Yeah. No, that's super awesome. I'm so looking forward to that.
Bwaaa tries to fight all through the night, deep in the heart of
So tell me about what's your relationship with Butch Hartman? You keep in touch?
Oh no.
Okay, I got to stop ending these things with question marks.
No, I did a long Twitter thread on this. I have absolutely no ill feelings about the guy.
Yeah.
He, as I said, he taught me how to direct.
Sure.
And he created the position of supervisor for me on the Fairly OddParents.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And the reason he did it was because it was right around that time that Danny Phantom had also been picked up.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he was being stretched increasingly thin. And so he needed someone who could do all of the things he could do. Like, he had Bob Boyle, who was the show's creative director. He handled the look of the show. And he had Steve Marmel, who was the head writer, who handled, everything with regard to the scripts and all that sort of thing. But Butch needed someone who, in a pinch, could do everything he could do. And, I'm one of those very, very, very small handful of people in the animation industry with experience as a writer, as a director, as a storyboard artist, as a character designer, as a voiceover artist, I've done every job there is in the pipeline. So if one person drops the ball, I can jump in and take over. That's what Butch needed. And so Butch created this position for me.
Yeah.
And it was only up until Disney came a knocking, and like I said, Danny Phantom was gearing up. Disney came knocking on my door, and they said, "We've got this show called American Dragon Jake Long, and we need a director for it." And they were like, "You would be the director. You would be the series director."
Yeah.
And I mean, the show's called American Dragon. It's about a kid who turns into a dragon. It's like, oh, that's so up my alley.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because what's funny is I had gained the reputation at this point of being the comedy action guy. Like, if you had a comedy show with a lot of action in it, I was your guy.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Pure comedy shows like SpongeBob wouldn't touch me, and pure action shows like Avatar wouldn't touch me. Yeah. But if you had an action comedy, I was your guy, and that's what they wanted this to be. And so, Disney comes to me with this wonderful thing. And so I go to Butch and I'm like, Butch, I don't want to go. By this time I'd been at Nickelodeon for probably about 7 years. And by animation terms, that's a long time.
Yeah.
I was comfortable there. I was happy there. All my friends were there. Like, that studio was family to me at the time.
Sure.
But this offer was just so good. And I mean, I'm sorry, but Disney is Disney.
That's true. Yeah, that's like going to the NFL or NBA or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean,
So I went to Butch and I'm like, look, Butch, I want to stay.
Yeah.
And here are the conditions I will stay.
Sure.
You either put me in charge of Danny Phantom or put me in charge of Fairly OddParents, and then you handle the other one. You, of course, would still be the executive. You would be the 800-pound gorilla.
Right.
But I want to run one of those shows.
Sure.
And he, as far as I could tell, he gave it very serious thought. But at the end of the day, and by the way, I don't blame him for this.
Yeah.
He couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so I went off to Disney, and my experience on American Dragon was terrible.
Sure. Okay.
And I did a whole long Twitter rant on this. The experience was terrible because nobody could decide what they wanted the show to be. And of course, the whole time I'm going, I left the Fairly OddParents for this.
Yeah. I
left the #2 kid show in America for this.
Yeah,
and it's falling apart.
It's just like anything else, though. I would imagine, at this point, you can't go back and you can't look back and you can't question yourself on those choices. You just keep on going, and it's not like it stopped you from doing anything else, Oh yeah, and by the way, the experience gave me, the kind of insights into industry mechanics that I heretofore never would have had. And once you're in the door in any studio, they look for excuses to keep you around. Certainly. So I wound up contributing a handful of weeks on the Phineas and Ferb movie, and I got to meet some of those guys. Yeah.
And I wound up directing yet another one. This would also be on my Mount Rushmore of underrated shows. When both Bob Boyle and Steve Marmel left the Fairly OddParents because Bob Boyle sold a show called Yin Yang Yo that was a Disney XD or a Disney Jetix show. They asked me to be the supervising director of that show. And so at that point I had already been at Disney before, so it was a really easy fit, and that wound up being a great experience. So, yes, believe me, there was a period there where I was like, oh no, what have I done? But I'm ultimately it wound up being the right move. Now, I don't think Butch ever really got over the fact that I left. I don't think he liked it.
Right.
And by the way, this is speculation on my part. I'm just guessing here.
Gotcha.
But just based on now, and I saw him in person a few years later, and they actually hired me to do a storyboard for, one of the final season episodes that I did a freelance board for. And the very, very last contact I had with him in any stretch of the imagination is I think a while back, it was either the 25th or 20th anniversary of the Fairly OddParents, and Butch put a big post about it on Facebook, and I responded something to it like, "Hey, congratulations to all involved. This was a great experience for me." And Butch replied, "It wouldn't have been the same without you."
That's
So
wonderful. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, I don't believe in the phrase "time heals all wounds," but I do believe that we learn more from those sort of experiences than just being.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, if we were just successful all the time, we'd have a real problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
So I've got a couple more things for you, F, if you're okay hanging on with us.
I'm good. I'm not in a hurry.
Number one, you keep referring to storyboards, and so just for those folks that are listening to us, can you tell us what a storyboard artist does and how do you develop that skill?
Oh boy, a storyboard is the very best analogy I can draw is the storyboard artist is to a cartoon what the architect is to a building.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's perfect.
So building the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. You are the story of that episode from stem to stern.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
And I do a whole. One of the reasons I think I came into contact with you guys was because I've started doing these sort of long format Twitter threads.
Yeah.
One of which explains storyboarding in minute detail, presumably as a tutorial for if you want to learn storyboarding.
Right.
Yeah.
But storyboarding is without question again, having worked all of the various steps in the pipeline, storyboarding is the absolute hardest one to do and the hardest one to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a storyboard artist, you're practically a director. And that means you're drawing out pretty much the entire cartoon. And that means staging, posing, facial expressions. The storyboard artist is fully one half of the character as an actor because you handle all the facial expression, all the pantomime, all that stuff. So you are making the cartoon.
Yeah.
The director is the one who sort of sits you down and says, "Here's where I sort of see this going, but here's the script. Now take it and go."
Yeah.
And a good or bad, a good storyboard artist can take a terrible script and make it great, and a bad storyboard artist can take a fantastic script and make it terrible.
That's just the fact that you call them architects, I think, is a wonderful way to explain what a storyboard artist does.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're willing to, in your Twitter threads or wherever, explain this to people, I think is fascinating because there's so many people that, especially in today's world, this is my job. I'm the only one who's good at it. You can't know what I do. You can't, you know what I'm saying? And so the fact that you're willing to tell, and you're shooting at kids or the parents of kids or whatever that are kind of wanting to get into this, these artistic kids. I taught art for a little while, and so you're talking to all the weirdos out there, and that's and that is A-okay, because guess what? The regular kids in school and the teachers in school aren't talking to these weirdo kids, and so somebody needs to tell them, you know what, you can use what you do and actually make a living.
Well, that's the thing. I have always made a point of sort of cultivating or putting myself around up and comers because those are the people who are hungry and those are the people who are eager.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I didn't go everyone I came up through the ranks with. Both on my very first sort of big show was the Wild Thornberries.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, that's one of my. That's personally one of my favorites from Nickelodeon of that era, because I'm British. I'm a British American, so I'm actually not American at all. I'm a British national.
You can hear it in his voice.
Yeah, you can hear it in my voice.
Yeah.
So the Nigel Thornberry, and then I just loved it. I love Safari. I love the Safari feel and everything. So it was just it really was one of my favorite shows. Yeah. I really internalized Donnie. He was probably my favorite character.
Flea. When see, that was my very first show, and that show was storyboarding boot camp.
Yeah.
Because it was at a time, first of all, the only reason I got the job was because it was at a time in animation where it was around 1997, and there was a huge boom going on for animation, both primetime and Nickelodeon.
Sure.
And if you could hold a pencil, you could get a job. And fortunately, I could hold a pencil. And so I had come to Los Angeles thinking I'll be a character designer. That's the kind of thing I can do. I'm good at drawing funny characters, so I'll be a character designer. And through this long series of just almost freakishly bizarre circumstances, I wound up getting an interview with Klasky Chupo for the Wild Thornberrys. And they were like, well, we don't need any character designers. Can you storyboard? And I lied through my teeth and said, you betcha.
Yeah, fake it till you make it, right?
Right. And so the next day, I'm surrounded by people who all went to school for this. Yeah. And who all knew what they were doing. And I'm suddenly being told, okay, here's a zebra stampede. Now storyboard it. And so, like I said, it was boot camp. I had to learn, and I had to learn fast.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, as I mentioned, I didn't go to Cal Arts, I didn't go to Sheridan, I didn't go to RISD, I didn't go to any of these highfalutin animation schools. I didn't know animation schools existed. Right. I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan.
There you go.
I have a degree in art, and it's a regular old art degree. It's got nothing to do with cartooning. It's got nothing to do with visual storytelling by any stretch. So I wanted to, create a bridge for the people, because I get asked all the time, how do I break into animation? How do I do this? How do I do that? And there's never a good short way to answer those questions. And so I'm now 2 chapters away from finishing up this 12-chapter series, Storyboarding 101. And then prior to that, one of the other questions that I get asked all the time is, hey, I've got a great idea for a show. What do I do with it? So the very first long format thread that I did was how to pitch a show. Yeah. And how to create and put together a Bible, and how to do all this stuff so that you can pitch a show.
Oh, that's fantastic.
To either networks or media outlets or whatever. So and again, this is for all the people who, because Cal Arts is crazy expensive. Cal Arts, where I taught for a while. Never went there, but I taught there.
Yeah.
Crazy expensive. Sheridan, crazy expensive, and really picky about who they let in. So, and the thing is, I know for a fact that there's talented people out there who aren't going to be able to go to these schools and who aren't going to get the same shots. So, I wanted to provide something that I would have loved to have had at my disposal when I was up and coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Boy, that's the epitome of teaching, right? I mean, that's the ultimate goal to teach is to pass along your experience and stuff so that others can learn. I mean, we just don't get enough chances to do that as instructors or teachers or whoever.
Absolutely. Well, when I was at Nickelodeon, Cal Arts was very regularly sort of poaching people from Nickelodeon to help sort of fill out their faculty. Right. And at one point, they were like, "Hey, do you want to come teach story for third year students?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, why not? That sounds like fun." It was more than fun. It was just one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. So ever since then, I've made a point. There was a whole year of my life where practically all I did was tour the U.S. and Canada, doing speaking engagements, tutorials, and workshops at animation schools to give people my insights on this stuff. Like I love teaching, and even when I'm not lecturing or teaching somewhere, I always make a point of having at least 1 or 2 apprentices. Sort of like I found someone on Twitter recently who literally volunteered. He was like, "Hey, if you ever want help, if you ever, I'm just looking for any way to break in." And I go, "Well, I'll tell you what, I will teach you some stuff and I will give you assignments." And so that's what we're doing right now. And also this, my storyboard artist in Africa, his name is Miles, and he's, again, he had never had something like this put in his lap, and his growth has been exponential. It's amazing to watch people who hadn't been given an opportunity to do something like this before, and just watch the progression from like 0 to 60 in no time flat. It's really rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've said before, I love teaching, but I don't like being a teacher. So there's two very different things to that. So
that's absolutely true.
When you're a teacher, you have to deal with adults, and so I didn't enjoy that part of it. So
yeah, well, Cal Arts didn't like me because I would because just as Cal Arts would poach from Nickelodeon, Disney and Nickelodeon would poach from Cal Arts. Like if someone started to appear as a rising star out of that school, they would get offered a job, and I would always tell the students, hey, if you get offered a job, you take it. Because school's not going anywhere, and nothing teaches better than real life experience. Because look, that's how I learned. I had to learn on the job.
Yeah.
And consequently, I do believe that that's why, among all, even though I came into the industry with less experience than anyone I knew, I was the first person to get made a director. Yeah. I was the first person to sell a show. And I think the reason for that was because I came in without all the prejudices and without all of the sort of reverence for the lore of animation that all these people sort of grew up with. And look, I revere, all that stuff as well, but I was able to come in and go, wow, there are some areas where you guys are just wasting all kinds of time, money, and resources, and it's not necessary. And so I worked out a way of making cartoons better, faster, cheaper without a reduction in quality.
That's fantastic. So I think we have come to the portion where I ask you about something that deals with this show. Yes. So if you're ready, John, we'll go ahead and start the interview. No, it's just a joke. So let me.
When are we going to talk about some King of the Hill?
That's right. So let me ask you about King of the Hill. What are your recollections, and is there any crossover for you, experience, anything there?
Do you know anybody affiliated with the show? Maybe like I mentioned Wes Archer because I know he works on Rick and Morty, so I didn't know if you had to work with him or not while you were doing the storyboard for the pilot or nothing.
Yeah. Yes. Wes Archer, I believe I have crossed paths with before, but when it comes to, it's funny, I've never had much luck with, apart from Rick and Morty and apart from South Park, I've never had much luck with any of the primetime adult animated series. I could not get hired on Family Guy, could not get hired on The Simpsons, could not get hired on Futurama. They want nothing to do with me, which that's not, the genre that I, have the most experience in. So I'm not even resentful about it. I don't blame them. As for King of the Hill, I remember that premiering when I was still living in Michigan and pondering moving to Los Angeles to try my luck at all this. Sure. And I remember I was a huge fan of Beavis and Butthead. And I remember at the time being like, no, you guys don't get it. Beavis and Butthead is brilliant. Beavis and Butthead was meta before anybody else was meta.
Absolutely.
And one of my favorite characters on Beavis and Butthead was Tom Anderson.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. So you did a good job on that one.
When they first started talking about King of the Hill, I was like, oh, this is going to be the adventures of Tom Anderson. And so when I discovered that it wasn't the adventures of young Tom Anderson, I was at first a little taken aback and disappointed. Sure. But then I watched it.
And it's Tom Anderson.
And I was like, this is a great show. No, it's funny. I've very much lost this ability, but when I first moved to Los Angeles, I could do a dead-on Tom Anderson and a dead-on like I could do any voice that Mike Judge could do.
That's fantastic.
Like I did a great Beavis and Butthead. My Tom Anderson. Well, let's face it.
That's
Tom
really
Anderson
good.
And Hank Hill are pretty much the same thing. I sell propane and propane accessories.
That's really good.
It's propane or get off my lawn. It's one of those two. That's it. That's the difference.
One of my, and this might have been in the first episode, because one of my favorite things about Hank Hill was his obsession with his lawn. And he was talking about someone else's lawn, and I don't know what they did wrong with their lawn, but he was like, that's a terrible thing to do to a lawn. It's like a pretty girl with short hair.
I think he was talking about the neighbor scalping his yard. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, is that what? And so from that point on, I was really hooked on season 1. and still pretty enthusiastic about season 2 and 3. I heard the show you guys did the other day about season 3 and them trying to get the football team over back to I remember that episode, and I remember just thinking, well, surely this show is not going to last past 3 seasons because it's not set in Los Angeles, and because it's not set in New York.
You got it.
And because it's what I still love about the show, and why I'm glad it's being revived, and why I'm just pro. Even though I stopped watching after about season 3, I've always been pro King of the Hill because it's about regular frigging people.
That's what I like about it, and I think that's like its success, and the reason why it lasted so long was because it, like you said, it's not L.A., it's not New York. It reaches the middle part of America. Like it was a TV show created for Middle America by somebody who lived at one point in his life a Middle American, lifestyle. Grew up in a suburb of Dallas, that kind of thing.
I mean, I've said this before about Hank. Everybody goes in thinking he's a redneck, and he's really he's a huge centrist. He doesn't really go one way or the other. And if you watch the show the way that we've been watching it, every episode ends with a morality play at the end. I mean, everything is family, faith. I mean, it's honestly very,
but not
it's
only
a very
that,
sweet show.
Not only that, it's the great direction too of the animation.
Sure.
Like it's just so well done and so well, like just the orchestration of it and how he's got it, like how I don't know, it's cinematic sometimes.
Well, what amazes me about the show sometimes, and John, maybe you'll play into this. The characters are very simple. Honestly, there's no real detail to them.
No,
well, because they were drawn by a guy who was just like, he wasn't an artist. He was just trying his hand at animation, and it really worked for him.
Yeah. My point was though that you don't need the detail. It's all in the writing. It's all in the story. You don't even need the action, really. You don't. The most active thing I can think of is Peggy falling from the sky. I mean, that's
exactly it. I mean, whereas it seems like, the Simpsons and again, boy, the Simpsons, for the first 7 seasons of that show, I was a devoted follower.
Too. Yeah.
But like nowadays, every episode ends with a car chase or with a or a musical number.
Yes,
that's the other big thing. It's like every friggin' adult-oriented primetime show has a musical number in it now.
Yeah.
It's no longer, the characters are no longer the star. It's the town that's the star.
Right.
That's what I liked about King of the Hill.
Yeah, I don't respond to that. It's like King of the Hill is about the characters, and the characters have subtlety and they have nuance. And
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how aware you are of the cancellation around King of the Hill or not, or what you know about it. But how do you feel personally knowing that King of the Hill was canceled for a mediocre show like the Cleveland show? Do you have any emotions on that?
Whenever it comes to decisions like that,
sure,
I have to say I gave up kind of trying to understand the thinking behind a lot of decisions a long time ago, because my pilot at Nickelodeon was up against one other that got picked up and absolutely flopped. It's one of those things where, and by the way, and this is the part where I'm supposed to talk about what a bunch of monsters executives are. Some of my best friends are executives.
Yeah.
It really is, everyone is really just trying to figure out, what do people want?
For sure.
You have people who go in and they have their agenda, or they have their this, or they have their that. But for the most part, everybody wants a show to be hit.
Yeah, absolutely.
The trouble is, for these executives, and I can't help but sort of feel for them a little bit. If you get behind a show and that show only does mediocre, your ass is fired and you never work again.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You can almost do better if you push a show that's a flop.
Yeah.
But if you push a show and it only does okay, then you're done. That's a stain on you forever, and part of the problem is so many great shows took a few seasons to get their bearing. I mean, if
that was what killed me though, was the Cleveland show was canceled after 4 years, and here I am. I had 12 years of King of the Hill. It was obviously it's a really big show for me. I'm sitting here doing a podcast about it, but it was like such a huge show for me. I mean, I literally, it's on right now at my house. It's on my TV just playing right now. Like it literally loops 24/7 on a TV I have in my game room. And
it could have been one of those things where it's like, well, we've got 12 seasons of King of the Hill. Let's try something else.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
just,
Well, I think it had a lot to do with the success of American Dad and Family Guy. Honestly, like Seth MacFarlane, it's not very often that you get such good shows from one individual creating that much popular the stuff that's like primetime popular like that. And I feel like that's what it mainly was. Well, he had these two great big shows, and King of the Hill was like on the back half of its lifespan. And it did still have a good following, but I think the following for King of the Hill now is probably bigger than it was at the ending of the show, because I troll on Twitter, not troll as in trolling, but I troll, patrol Twitter and look for all the King of the Hill stuff. I literally just type in King of the Hill and I just scroll down and look at everything. And it seems that whenever this resurgence happens, they're gonna be even bigger than maybe they were at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, you can't feel too bad for Mike Judge, because
no, I can't at all.
Here's the thing: Mike Judge is living the life of Riley, because between Silicon Valley, which by the way, holy cow,
one of the best shows.
That is one of the best shows ever.
It's just such a great ensemble cast. Such a great cast.
Great show.
And I don't know, there was a little movie called Office Space that
was good.
I feel like
that was a great one. Yeah, and then he's we actually got to
that's one of my top 4.
Yeah, we're actually I'm trying to work out an interview with Diedrich Bader right now too, and he's been hard to pin down, but I'm trying to get an interview with him because he's not only one of my favorite voice actors for King of the Hill, but he's like one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite like funny guys. I was really big on Drew Carey show. So
I met him I met him one year at an Autorama when I was about 12. Does that count?
That counts. Yeah,
sure.
That count.
All right.
See, and by the way, since I've mentioned all those other things, I would be remiss if I did not mention the prophetic masterpiece that is Idiocracy.
Oh yeah.
It is
super prophetic. I love it.
It's frightening how prophetic.
Yeah,
yes.
it is. It's terrifying.
So the fact of the matter is, Mike Judge doesn't have to worry.
No,
he has his audience, and his audience will follow him anywhere.
Oh yeah, I will. I would follow him into a burning building. I really would. Like his comedy is.
By golly, that is what you want.
Yeah,
you can, and honestly, that's in a very sort of silly. Everyone's going to make fun of me for saying this, but this is sort of what I'm trying to establish on Twitter myself. Like I've literally only been on Twitter for a year.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, a lot of these people like these shows specifically for what I contributed to them.
Yeah.
It's like maybe there's an audience for my stuff, and maybe I can just put out stuff, yes, also in the form of tutorials, but I'm also going to do some comics and really dumb. I have a YouTube channel where I put really just dumb stuff up on it.
Yeah.
But, this is the same guy who did your favorite episode of the Fairly OddParents,
right.
or the guy who designed the tongue walking monster on Invader Zim, or the guy who did that, so and that's the thing. I've never felt like I needed a humongous audience, but I like enough of an audience to feel like, oh, I'm going to tell this joke and they're going to think it's funny.
Well, I'll tell you, F, there is some wisdom in there in that whole audience thing. One of the other things I do here is I run the podcast network that we have. And one of the things I will tell some of these smaller shows, more niche shows, I'll say, I don't need you to have, 1 million followers on your show. I don't need you to have 1 million downloads. I need you to have between 100 and 1,000 that count. You know, I need you to
Right.
have that audience that cares enough about what you say to follow you.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that's what I
And-
need.
and
I need
that's-
that quality over quantity.
And I do social media stuff too. So when I try to give people advice on social media stuff, where he says quality over quantity, yeah, it's quality over quantity on social media stuff too.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Absolutely.
creating content with intent. A lot of people create content and put
Yes.
stuff on social media, and they're just blindly doing it, hoping something sticks instead of having even just a slight, 5% of intent behind it would
Absolutely.
it changes
Absolutely.
it changes the direction. You know.
Well,
See, and that's where I should also mention there are two big things that I'm kind of really excited about that are going to be coming out this year.
okay.
One is Garbage Boy and Trash Can, and if if you're one of those Cartoon Network old school people who just like love cartoons that are cartoons for cartoon's sake,
Right.
that's gonna be the offering I have for you in the upcoming year.
Awesome.
The other thing I did is I hooked up with a couple of fellas in Los Angeles to create a show that is coming out on YouTube this year called Mad Panda and Ribbit.
Okay.
And that is for my more grown-up audience. And it's one of the very few shows where it looks as slick as anything on TV.
Yeah.
You guys already have website and stuff for all that already?
Yeah,
out?
it's up there on YouTube. If you just go to Mad Panda and Ribbit,
Oh,
I've
awesome.
got links on
Okay.
it all over my Twitter.
Excellent.
But it's one of the only occasions where it was me and the two creators doing the whole first two episodes, and they just let me do my thing. Like they just left me alone.
That's awesome. Don't you just love that when you're doing your job that you know how to do and they just let you do it?
Yeah.
I love that.
And it shows in the work. And I this is something I went on a rant about the other day. It's like, this business of making cartoons, it's not rocket science. Everybody is always looking for what is the secret ingredient? What is the secret ingredient?
Right.
The secret ingredient is your people making the show having a good time doing what they're doing.
Gotcha.
That always shows through. You can watch a show and you can tell when the people are tortured,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can watch a show where you can tell people are having a great time. And that is always the magic ingredient that makes something a hit.
Yeah.
And
Quick
in
question.
both of these instances,
Quick question about the Mad
we've
Panda
just
thing.
been having a blast. Yeah, what's that? Sorry.
No, quick question about the Mad Panda thing. So I've looked up. I typed it in and saw it on Twitter. Are you the guy who drew the different the panda like Tupac, the panda dressed as Lil
Yeah.
Wayne?
No, I didn't draw those specific drawings, but I helped to develop the show.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I'm the supervising director of the show, and I
that's
did all the
beautiful.
storyboards for it.
That's
Can't
wonderful.
wait. Yeah, I can't wait.
Show,
Is it already out? Is that what is it? Is it already
no, it's coming out. There's a bunch of teasers up on YouTube.
okay.
Cool.
And it was created by Evan Bogart and Justin Gray. Now, Evan Bogart, his dad has a biopic out about his life right now because he was the record producer behind Kiss and behind a whole bunch of other stuff. So, and Evan Bogart himself is a huge music producer and a songwriter and whatnot. I mean, he wrote Beyonce's Halo.
Yeah.
So,
Oh wow,
so-
that's
and
crazy.
Justin Gray is also really huge in that industry, and they wanted to do a show that mixed both music and comedy in cartoon form, and they came and found me, and the result is Mad Panda and Ribbit, and it's the culmination of sort of our sense of humor, and that's the thing. Our sense of humor just gels completely. And that too is going to be so. Like I say, I've got two offerings coming up in the very near future for the folks who like the sort of Cartoon Network style. We got Garbage Boy and Trash Can, and then for the folks who like the sort of more Rick and Morty, Family Guy, more adult oriented humor, it's Mad Panda and Ribbit all the way. And in both instances, they're situations where I was just allowed to do my thing.
Yeah.
And so.
And for our audience, if you want to find that, you could go and type in Mad Panda and Ribbit, like the frog, Ribbit. It's and also they abbreviated a lot, and it's Mad P, the and symbol, and A and Ribbit. So I like that little unique thing they did with the and there in the middle of Panda. I like that.
Well, and if you just follow me on Twitter, I'm going to be promoting the hell out of this stuff.
And you guys can
As it
find
gets
him at
closer.
Twitter at John F. Fountain. That is where you'll be able to find him on Twitter there.
Yeah.
My Twitter name or whatever is at Fountain Cartoon.
There you
There you
go.
go.
Fountain Cartoon.
So, F, real quick on your way out of here, I've got one little thing that just popped in my head as you were talking.
Yeah.
Any experience at all with John K. Ren and Stimpy, John K.
Not directly. I met him
Okay.
once.
Okay.
Didn't really get a feel for what
Yeah.
type of person he was or
Gotcha.
anything. I've worked with many people who were close to him, who were at his side, who were part of that whole Ren and Stimpy thing. One of my best, I don't want to say best friends because it's not like we call each other on the phone and go, "What are you doing?"
Right. Sure.
But one of my good,
No, you
one
hang
of
up
my
first.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, no. One of my good, I'll go ahead and say pals back from my Oh Yeah Cartoons early Nickelodeon days is Vincent Waller,
Okay.
and he was the director of the Rubber Nipple Salesman.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
he was one of John K's like right hand dudes.
Yeah.
And he also went on to be a big force on SpongeBob. And
Yeah.
he's done he's a legend. He's animation royalty.
Yeah.
So I know him. I've been to his house a couple of times.
Yeah.
I know that guy, Bob Boyle, who was the
Right.
the art director for the Fairly OddParents, also worked for John K. So, I've been John K. adjacent many times, but never really worked with him.
So it just, that was absolutely a sweet spot for me, was that Ren and Stimpy era, right? And so to me, when I look back at that time, I watched some of the cartoons. Don't you think everybody in that production was just nuts? I mean, they had to be nuts, right? I mean, the stuff they were putting out at the time, it just didn't exist. I mean, there wasn't anything like
Talking about
that.
Ren and Stimpy?
Yeah.
I wonder if I wonder how much of it was drug fueled. None.
Could have been.
Some.
Could have been.
Actually, from what I understand, almost none of it.
Really?
No, that's what people
what
say is that a lot of this stuff that we think people are on drugs
So-
creating, they're just crazy to begin with. They're
maybe-
just crazy people, so they make crazy stuff.
They were just trying to tamp the voices down in their head. Is all it was.
That's exactly it. See, the thing is, for a long time, cartoons were not funny.
Yeah.
And they weren't focused on humor. They were focused on selling toys. And so when John K came along, and by the way, John K was also there with Joe Murray, who created, again, in my opinion, one of the most underrated shows of all time, Rocko's Modern Life.
Yeah. Yeah.
When those guys came along and did shows that were cartoony cartoons that were meant to be funny, and same thing goes, by the way, with Craig McCracken and Gendy Tartovsky and all those old Cartoon Network guys. It wasn't so much that they all started taking drugs and going crazy, because I don't think any of them did.
Yeah.
What happened was they were unleashed.
Yeah.
Unleashed.
They were suddenly sort of taken off the leash, and all at once everyone was like, "Oh wow, I guess people like things to be good." And I guess the people to make cartoons should be cartoonists, and so
no kidding.
and that's largely how I was when there was a period. The Wild Thornberries was, like I say, that was just work. Like, that was just hard. You didn't get to contribute to the story. You just followed the script. And by the way, it was a great show. I was grateful for my time on that show. But once I'd started on the Fairly OddParents and Butch had started to really give me carte blanche to sort of change whatever I wanted in the script, and to add and subtract, and to punch stuff up with gags, that's how I felt. I'm like, ooh, I get to suddenly be funny, so I think that's what it was. I think there were a lot of frustrated animators who knew they could be funny, but just weren't given the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it.
I just love the sentiment on that show, and just the way it's presented. I love the close-up stills and all the things, just kind of reinvented and gave me that Looney Tunes feel again, plus it was gross. And so that helped. That helped a lot.
It was a return to what cartoons were intended to be.
Well, F, if you could do us a big favor and give us all of your the ways people can find out about projects coming up, how they can watch your unhinged rants on Twitter and all of that, we would really appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. Well, for all things me related, just look me up at Fountain Cartoon. That's FOUNTAIN, just like a water fountain. So at Fountain Cartoon. Reach out to me on Twitter. I'm really accessible.
That's cool.
This is apparent how successful he is. He decided to give us an hour or so of his time.
That's right.
Just a bunch of country bumpkins from Texas.
That's right. We really appreciate it.
I love me some country bumpkins from Texas. And the fact is, I was telling someone about this on Twitter the other day. They sent me a DM. Just saying, oh my gosh, you had such a great effect on my childhood, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote directly back and I was like, what? You really have no idea how much that means to me. Thank you so much. You know, blah, blah, blah. They're like, I can't believe you wrote back.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep telling people, when I was really making my bones in the business, there was no Twitter.
Yeah.
There was no, people had stopped writing fan mail.
Sure.
There were a few news groups out there on the internet, but there was no direct one-on-one contact with fans. It was only when I started discovering on Twitter, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a whole group of people out there who loved my life as a teenage robot.
Yeah. There's a big cult following for that.
We had no way of sort of interacting with the fans or sort of hearing what did they like, what did they not like, all this stuff. So for me, this opportunity to be able to, really just touch base with people who loved it in the past and then also get a feel for what are people looking at now? What do people like now? And what's funny about that is I'll every now and then, bump into someone who's the creator of a newer show and then be like, wait a minute, you're John Fountain? You worked on such and such? Oh my gosh, that was such a huge influence. So it's like I'm seeing a new generation of creators who are influenced by the generation that I came from.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
It's a real pleasure.
It is. It's just crazy to me that people are growing up in a world where they can get immediate feedback. To things that they do, and that's such a blessing and a curse at the same time. I would imagine.
Yeah, it's been great for us too with our little podcast because we actually we have built a sizable, what we consider for country bumpkins, a sizable following, and.
I listen to your show. You guys do a great show, and
thank you.
In a world where everybody's doing a podcast, you guys put on a great show.
Well,
so,
we appreciate that. Yeah, we
appreciate it.
We've been doing it about a year now or so. This particular podcast, Mike's been podcasting for a little bit longer than I have, but this is my first podcast to ever do. So the fact that somebody who's as established as you are in media, I appreciate that you enjoyed our show. Also, I'm also working on, I'll have to have you on as a guest whenever I get this show fleshed out, but I'm working on an animation specific just for animation and completely to do with I'm talking about animation from the beginning of animation to now, so.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, look, I want to be on that one every episode.
I could have you on as often as you want or as little as you want, or you could even be the co-host of it if you wanted. It wouldn't make a difference to me.
I've been, what's funny is I've actually sort of dipped my toes in those waters a bit because I was like, one time I was on Twitter and I'm like, I'm gonna try out this Twitter Spaces and see what happens, figuring no one would show up.
Yeah.
And like 50 people showed up and we had this great conversation about animation. And
Isn't that just wonderful?
Oh, it's amazing. The thing is I lack the sort of I lack the oomph to actually do any of the technical stuff or put this stuff together. So I'll come on as often as you want. But
man, we can help with that.
We can help with the tech side. If you wanted to be a regular co-host of the show with me, then we could work that out definitely. Because
I love it.
Mike's got all the tech stuff worked out. You would just be just be me and you discussing.
Yeah, we'll be
animation
in touch
from the beginning.
We'll be in touch.
I'd be all for that.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome.
In the meantime, the other place I want to encourage people to look me up because this is the place that has the least amount of traction right now is Fountain's Pen Comics on YouTube. It's awesome. A very shabby little channel at the moment, but some of the videos from my tutorials are up on there. And some really, really dumb jokes in animated form.
Hey, by the way, I will say that I love your little sketch of a character of yourself that you use on Twitter. You know what it? And again, I've told you my love for John Kay and Ren and Stimpy, so it reminds me very much of what was it, George American or whatever his name was.
George Liquor.
Yeah, George Liquor. Yeah, All American. Yeah. You look stunningly like him in maybe a compressed form.
It's weird because I get frustrated probably about as easily as he does. It's weird because you look at a lot of animators and you can automatically point to who their influences are. But again, because I wasn't raised in the school of animation, like that's me doing my John K style, but I could also do drawing in my Invader Zim style or my Fairly OddParents style. Like I'm kind of a chameleon as far as that goes.
I will tell you, man, I 100% see it in there. If I look at it long enough, I can see it all, I really, really appreciate you being here. And
so much.
And I also want to thank you for willing to be a teacher to anybody who wants to get into this industry or even get adjacent to this industry. Because those kids are out there looking for some direction, and everybody in their bumpkin household, like Rusty says, is telling them you're never going to make any money drawing pictures, and that sort of thing. And so,
absolutely.
Boy,
my dad told me I'd never
really
make any money talking into a microphone, and I've still not made any money. So he's not far from the truth yet.
Yeah, but really, seriously, thank you for that.
This has been an absolute pleasure. Let's do this again.
Yes, sir.
The fact of the matter is, I had a whole list. I had more King of the Hill stuff I was ready to talk about.
Oh, we'll do it again. Yeah, we'll
definitely have you on as a King of the Hill guest, and we'll try to stay more centric to King of the Hill next time. I'll also be in touch with you about the other show too. So I'm going to work on some of that stuff, and then it'd be great, for you to be my co-host. I would be honored.
You're now our official North Carolina correspondent. So.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's an honor.
How's the weather?
Surprisingly cold.
Yeah. For March.
I know. It's they call it Fool's Spring.
Fool's Spring. I've never heard that. I like that.
I've never heard that either. I like that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of fools. I'll let them know. All right. Well, Ev, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
And
this was
I'm gonna grab an email address or something from Rusty, and you and I will be in touch, and we'll see if we can't do something down the line.
All right. Zigga zigga ah, party people.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, Rusty, I cannot say enough about how John F. Fountain, or just F, gave us his time. I mean, that was just fantastic.
That was a really fantastic interview. For an interview that I didn't expect. I told him we usually only take about 30 minutes of his time, the longest an hour. But man, it was just a lot of great stuff. It was just
fun to listen to.
Yeah, I wasn't even
super interesting.
Usually, some guests, you start looking at your clock when it gets a little 30 minutes in, but I wasn't even worried about the clock. I really appreciated his time for sure.
You can see my list here. I had probably 15 things written down, and I kept writing things down and kept writing things down.
Yeah, your pages, you were tearing pages off at one point.
Right. That's right. Yeah, he really answered a lot of questions for me, and I can't thank him enough for taking his time and doing this. Now, real quick, fans of the show, if you're still around, we did talk about an animation type podcast. Let us know if you'd be interested in listening to something like that, especially if we got F to be involved in it. That is, Rusty did not see my note, but at the top of it, I said, would he be open to an animation podcast? And then you brought it up.
I didn't even see that. Yeah. I brought it up. Yeah, because it's been on my mind for so long, the animation podcast, because I have literally a slew of, I have a folder on my Google Chrome tab with all the research and everything that I've been doing. So
I think it would be a fantastic show, but I'd love to hear from some fans, just see if they'd like it.
Yeah, so if any of the fans of this podcast, I
can't imagine they wouldn't. But
So if you're a personal fan of this podcast, hit me on the socials. Let me know what you think about an animation podcast. You can hit Mike at info@roguemedianetwork.com too with your ideas, suggestions.
Absolutely.
If y'all like that, then we'll get it in motion and see what we could cook up for you guys.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, wonderful.
All right, well, tell them how they can get a hold of us.
You can find us at Linktree, linktr.ee/BWAAAKOTH. That's Bwaaa, KOTH, with 3 A's, and you can find us on all social media as well if you don't want to go to Linktree. So we appreciate y'all. Hopefully y'all stuck around to hear all the good stuff that F had to say, and I'm going to be in touch with him and
nice guy.
Get something cooked up for you guys. And if not get something cooked up for you guys, I might just, put a couple Hot Pockets in the microwave when I get home and have lunch.
That sounds good. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for being with us, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Wimatanye.
Wimatanye.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.